This story begins in the early 18th century, a time of great intellectual and social upheaval in Europe. The Age of Enlightenment was in full swing, challenging traditional power structures and fostering new ideas about individual liberty, fraternity, and the pursuit of knowledge. It was in this fertile ground that modern Freemasonry took root. While the exact origins of Freemasonry are shrouded in mystery and debate, we can trace its modern incarnation to 1717 in London, England. It was here that four lodges came together to form the First Grand Lodge, marking the birth of organized Freemasonry as we know it today. But what exactly is Freemasonry, and why did it capture the imagination of so many? At its core, Freemasonry is a fraternal organization that uses stonemasons' tools and customs as allegorical guides for moral and personal development. The square and compass, perhaps the most recognizable Masonic symbol, represent morality and the boundaries of ethical conduct. The letter G, often found at the center of this emblem, can stand for both God and geometry, underscoring the Masonic emphasis on both spiritual and rational pursuits. Freemasonry's appeal lay in its promise of personal growth, its emphasis on moral living, and the bonds of brotherhood it fostered among its members. It offered a space where men from different social classes could meet as equals, bound by shared values and a commitment to self-improvement. This egalitarian aspect was particularly attractive in an era still dominated by rigid social hierarchies. The organization's structure, with its system of degrees, secret handshakes, and esoteric rituals, added an air of mystery that both intrigued outsiders and strengthened the bonds between members. The three primary degrees, entered apprentice, fellow craft, and master mason, represented stages of moral and intellectual development, each with its own set of teachings and ceremonies. As Freemasonry spread across Europe, it attracted a diverse membership. Intellectuals were drawn to its philosophical aspects, while aristocrats appreciated its exclusivity and networking opportunities. Merchants and craftsmen found in it a means of establishing trustworthy business connections. Even royalty was not immune to its appeal, with Frederick the Great of Prussia being a notable Masonic enthusiast. However, this rapid growth and influence also bred suspicion. The Catholic Church, in particular, viewed Freemasonry with alarm. In 1738, Pope Clement XII issued the papal bull In Eminenti Apostolatus Specula, condemning Freemasonry and forbidding Catholics from joining the organization under pain of excommunication. This marked the beginning of a long-standing conflict between Freemasonry and the Catholic Church, a tension that would later play into Nazi anti-Masonic rhetoric. Despite such opposition, Freemasonry continued to flourish, spreading not only across Europe but also to the Americas and beyond. In the United States, it played a significant role in the founding of the nation, with prominent figures such as George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, and Paul Revere all being Freemasons. Now, let's turn our attention to the development of Freemasonry in Germany, a crucial element in understanding the later Nazi persecution of the organization. Freemasonry arrived in Germany in the 1730s, quickly gaining popularity among the intellectual and social elites. The first German lodge, Absalom zu den drei Nesseln, Absalom of the Three Nettles, was founded in Hamburg in 1737. From there, Masonic lodges spread rapidly across the German states. German Freemasonry, however, developed some unique characteristics that set it apart from its counterparts in other countries. The most significant of these was the emergence of the Old Prussian Grand Lodges system. These lodges, established in the late 18th century, became the dominant form of Freemasonry in Prussia and later in the German Empire. The Old Prussian Grand Lodges were the Grand Lodge of the Three Globes, founded in 1744, the Grand National Mother Lodge, to the Three Globes, established in 1766, the Grand Lodge Royal York of Friendship, dating from 1798. These lodges were distinctive in several ways. First, They maintained a close relationship with the Prussian state and the Hohenzollern monarchy. Frederick the Great, himself a Freemason, granted them special privileges and protection. This close association with the state would later become a point of criticism, with some accusing German Freemasonry of being too nationalistic and conservative. Second, and crucially for our story, the old Prussian Grand Lodges were explicitly Christian in character. They required their members to profess Christian faith, effectively excluding Jews and members of other religions from joining. This policy stood in contrast to the more inclusive approach of English and French Freemasonry, which welcomed men of all faiths. The Christian exclusivity of the old Prussian Grand Lodges would have far-reaching consequences. It created a split within German Freemasonry, with more liberal, religiously inclusive lodges emerging in opposition to the old Prussian system. More significantly, it failed to protect German Freemasonry from later Nazi accusations of being part of a Jewish conspiracy. Despite these internal divisions, German Freemasonry played a significant role in the country's intellectual and cultural life throughout the 19th century. Masonic lodges became centers of philosophical discussion, charitable work, and social networking. Many prominent figures in German society were Freemasons, including writers, musicians, politicians, and businessmen. However, the very success and influence of Freemasonry in Germany also made it a target for those who saw it as a threat to traditional values or national interests. Anti-Masonic sentiment began to grow in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, fueled by a combination of religious opposition, political suspicion, and conspiracy theories. The defeat of Germany in World War I and the subsequent political and economic turmoil created fertile ground for extremist ideologies. It was in this context that the Nazi Party emerged, bringing with it a virulent strain of anti-Masonic rhetoric that would ultimately lead to the persecution and near destruction of Freemasonry in Germany. As we transition into the 20th century, we find ourselves in a Germany reeling from the devastating effects of World War I. The once proud nation was humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, its economy in shambles, and its people searching for answers and someone to blame for their misfortunes. It was in this volatile environment that the Nazi Party was born. The origins of the Nazi Party can be traced back to 1919, when Anton Drexler founded the German Workers' Party, Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or DAP, in Munich. This small, nationalist group caught the attention of a young Adolf Hitler, who joined the party that same year. Hitler quickly rose through the ranks, becoming the party's chief propagandist and, in 1921, its leader. Under Hitler's leadership, the party was renamed the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei, or NSDAP, commonly known as the Nazi Party. Hitler and his followers developed an ideology that blended extreme nationalism, anti-Semitism, and anti-communism with populist economic policies. The Nazi worldview was shaped by several key influences. One of the most significant was the concept of folkish nationalism, which emphasized the idea of a pure German race rooted in blood and soil. This racist ideology provided the foundation for the Nazis' later policies of persecution and genocide. Another crucial element was the belief in a global conspiracy against Germany. The Nazis promoted the idea that Germany's defeat in World War I was not due to military failure, but rather to betrayal by internal enemies, particularly Jews, communists, and yes, Freemasons. This stab-in-the-back myth, Volkslegende, became a central part of Nazi propaganda. Hitler himself was deeply influenced by anti-Semitic and nationalist writers. In his manifesto Mein Kampf, written while he was imprisoned following the failed Beer Hall Putsch of 1923, Hitler laid out his worldview and his plans for Germany's future. It was in this book that he first articulated his views on Freemasonry, linking it to what he saw as a Jewish conspiracy for world domination. In Mein Kampf, Hitler wrote, "The general pacifistic paralysis of the national instinct of self-preservation begun by Freemasonry is then transmitted to the masses of society by the Jewish press." This statement encapsulates the Nazi view of Freemasonry as part of a larger, Jewish-led plot to weaken Germany and other nations. But why did the Nazis target Freemasonry specifically? Several factors contributed to their anti-Masonic stance. 1. Internationalism. The Nazis viewed Freemasonry's international character as a threat to their nationalist ideology. The idea of a brotherhood that transcended national boundaries was anathema to their vision of a pure German nation. 2. Secrecy. The secretive nature of Masonic rituals and meetings bred suspicion. The Nazis, like many others before them, saw this secrecy as evidence of nefarious plotting. 3. Enlightenment values. Freemasonry's emphasis on reason, individual liberty, and universal brotherhood stood in stark contrast to the Nazis' authoritarian, collectivist, and racist ideology. 4. Alleged Jewish connections. Despite the fact that many German Masonic lodges excluded Jews, the Nazis persistently linked Freemasonry with Judaism in their propaganda. 5. Perceived political influence. The Nazis believed that Freemasons held disproportionate power in politics and finance, using this influence to work against German interests. One of the key figures in developing Nazi anti-Masonic ideology was Alfred Rosenberg. Born in 1893 in what is now Estonia, Rosenberg joined the Nazi Party in 1919 and quickly became one of its chief ideologues. His 1930 book, The Myth of the 20th Century, became a foundational text of Nazi ideology, second only to Hitler's Mein Kampf in importance. Rosenberg's work expanded on the idea of a Judeo-Masonic conspiracy. He argued that Freemasonry was a tool of Jewish interests designed to undermine the racial purity and cultural integrity of European nations. Rosenberg wrote, "Freemasonry is one of the most dangerous Jewish organizations for the deception of Aryan peoples." This conflation of Freemasonry with Judaism and international conspiracies became a cornerstone of Nazi propaganda. It provided a convenient scapegoat for Germany's problems and justified the party's later actions against both groups. As the Nazi Party gained popularity in the late 1920s and early 1930s, its anti-Masonic rhetoric intensified. Nazi speakers and publications regularly attacked Freemasonry, portraying it as an enemy of the German people. This propaganda campaign laid the groundwork for the persecution that would follow once the Nazis came to power. The Nazi rise to power was swift and decisive. In the 1930 federal election, the Nazi Party became the second-largest party in the Reichstag. 2 years later, in July 1932, they became the largest party, though still without a majority. On January 30, 1933, President Paul von Hindenburg appointed Hitler as Chancellor, setting the stage for the Nazi seizure of total power. Within months, the Nazis had dismantled Germany's democratic institutions and established a one-party dictatorship. The Enabling Act of March 1933 gave Hitler's cabinet the power to enact laws without the consent of Parliament. This marked the beginning of the Third Reich and the start of a dark chapter in German history. For Freemasons in Germany, the Nazi takeover spelled doom. The persecution that had been threatened in Nazi propaganda was about to become a horrifying reality. As the Nazi regime consolidated its power in 1933, it wasted no time in turning its ideological hatred of Freemasonry into concrete action. The campaign against Freemasonry was swift, systematic, and ruthless, aimed at completely eradicating the organization from German society. The first salvo in this campaign came on January 30, 1933, the very day Hitler was appointed Chancellor. That evening, a group of SA, Sturmabteilung, men stormed the building of the Grand Lodge of Hamburg, ransacking the premises and destroying Masonic regalia and documents. This act of vandalism was a harbinger of the widespread persecution to come. In the months that followed, Nazi authorities implemented a series of measures designed to dismantle Freemasonry in Germany. 1. Closure of lodges. On April 7, 1933, Hermann Göring, then Minister-President of Prussia, ordered the immediate closure of all Masonic lodges in Prussia. This decree was soon extended to the rest of Germany. Lodges were given the option to voluntarily dissolve or face forcible closure. 2. Confiscation of property. The Nazi regime seized Masonic buildings, funds, and other assets. Many lodge buildings were repurposed for Nazi use, becoming local party headquarters or SA barracks. 3. Banning of Masonic symbols. The display of Masonic symbols, such as the square and compass, was prohibited. Freemasons were ordered to remove these symbols from gravestones and other public displays. 4. Purges from public service. Freemasons were systematically removed from positions in government, education, and the military. Many were forced into early retirement or dismissed outright. 5. Public denunciations. The Nazi-controlled media launched a propaganda campaign against Freemasonry, portraying it as part of a Jewish conspiracy against Germany. Freemasons were publicly denounced as traitors and enemies of the state. 6. Creation of anti-Masonic exhibitions. The regime organized public exhibitions showcasing alleged Masonic plots and rituals designed to turn public opinion against the organization. The impact on German Freemasonry was devastating. By the summer of 1935, virtually all Masonic lodges in Germany had been closed or voluntarily dissolved. The membership of German Freemasonry, which had numbered around 80,000 in 1933, was effectively reduced to zero within 2 years. Many German Freemasons, faced with this onslaught, attempted to distance themselves from the organization. Some joined Nazi-approved replacements such as the German Faith Movement or the National Christian Order of Frederick the Great. Others publicly renounced their Masonic ties in an attempt to avoid persecution. However, these efforts often proved futile. The Nazis maintained detailed records of Masonic membership, using them to continue tracking and persecuting former Freemasons throughout the Third Reich. Many Freemasons found themselves subjected to ongoing surveillance, harassment, and discrimination, even years after their lodges had been closed. The persecution extended beyond Germany's borders as the Nazi regime expanded. In Austria, following the Anschluss in 1938, Masonic lodges were immediately closed and their property confiscated. Similar actions were taken in Czechoslovakia after the German occupation in 1939. One of the key figures driving this anti-Masonic campaign was Reinhard Heydrich, head of the Reich Main Security Office, RSHA. Heydrich was obsessed with uncovering supposed Masonic conspiracies and played a crucial role in coordinating the regime's actions against Freemasons. Under Heydrich's direction, the RSHA created a special unit dedicated to anti-Masonic activities. This unit, led by SS Sturmbannführer Werner Braun, was responsible for gathering intelligence on Freemasons, interrogating suspects, and coordinating with other Nazi agencies in the persecution of Masons. The fate of individual Freemasons varied. Some managed to escape Germany, fleeing to countries where Freemasonry was still permitted. Others went into internal exile, severing all ties with their Masonic past and attempting to live quietly under the Nazi regime. However, many Freemasons faced much harsher consequences. Thousands were arrested and sent to concentration camps. In these camps, Freemasons were forced to wear an inverted red triangle, marking them as political prisoners. While the exact number of Freemasons who perished in the camps is unknown, estimates suggest it was in the thousands. Notable Freemasons who fell victim to Nazi persecution included 1. Dr. Leo Muffelmann. A prominent Masonic leader and advocate for international cooperation, Muffelmann was arrested in 1935 and spent several years in concentration camps before being released in 1939. 2. Karl von Ossietzky. A pacifist and winner of the 1935 Nobel Peace Prize, Ossietzky was also a Freemason. He was arrested in 1933 and died in 1938 as a result of his treatment in Nazi custody. 3. Johannes Possel. The last Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Hamburg, Possel was arrested in 1937 and spent 7 years in concentration camps, including Sachsenhausen and Dachau. As the Nazi regime tightened its grip on power and expanded its territorial control, it embarked on a massive campaign of cultural plunder. This effort, unprecedented in its scale and systematic nature, targeted not only art and historical artifacts but also libraries and archives. Masonic collections were of particular interest to the Nazi leadership. The looting of Masonic archives was driven by several motivations. 1. Ideological. The Nazis believed that Masonic documents contained evidence of Jewish Masonic conspiracies against Germany and other nations. 2. Intelligence gathering. They hoped to uncover information about Masonic networks and membership that could be used for further persecutions. 3. Occult interests. Some Nazi leaders, particularly Heinrich Himmler, were fascinated by esoteric knowledge and believed Masonic archives might contain valuable mystical secrets. 4. Cultural destruction. By seizing and potentially destroying Masonic archives, the Nazis sought to erase the cultural memory of Freemasonry. The most significant event in this campaign of plunder occurred in June 1940, following the fall of France to Nazi forces. Special Nazi units, operating under the orders of Alfred Rosenberg, targeted the headquarters of French Masonic obediences in Paris. The primary focus was the Grand Orient de France, the largest Masonic obedience in France, with a history dating back to 1733. Its headquarters at 16 Rue Cadet in Paris housed an extensive library and archive, including rare books, manuscripts, and Masonic artifacts dating back centuries. On June 19, 1940, Nazi forces entered the Grand Orient building. Over the next several days, they systematically looted the premises, confiscating thousands of books, documents, and objects. Similar operations were carried out at the headquarters of other French Masonic bodies, including the Grande Loge de France. The scale of this looting operation was immense. It's estimated that over 600 linear meters of archival documents were seized from French Masonic organizations alone. These materials were carefully packed and shipped to Germany for further study and analysis. The man overseeing this operation was Baron Kurt von Baer, a member of the Einsatzstab Reichsleiter Rosenberg, ERR, the Nazi organization responsible for appropriating cultural property in occupied territories. Von Baer personally supervised the cataloging and shipment of the looted Masonic materials. Once in Germany, these archives were distributed to various Nazi agencies for study. A significant portion went to the Reich Main Security Office, RSHA, in Berlin, where they were analyzed for intelligence purposes. Other materials were sent to the Institute for the Study of the Jewish Question in Frankfurt, an organization established by Alfred Rosenberg to conduct research supporting Nazi racial theories. Heinrich Himmler, the leader of the SS, took a particular interest in the seized Masonic archives. Himmler, known for his fascination with the occult and esoteric knowledge, believed that these documents might contain valuable mystical secrets. He established a special research group within the SS, known as the H. Sonderkommando, to study the confiscated Masonic materials. This group, led by SS Sturmbannführer Otto Skorzeny, was based at Welsburg Castle in Westphalia. Welsburg, which Himmler envisioned as a mystical center for the SS, became a repository for many of the looted Masonic documents and artifacts. As World War II progressed, the Nazi regime's campaign against Freemasonry took on a broader geopolitical dimension. The looting of Masonic archives and the persecution of Freemasons were not isolated actions but part of a larger strategy that involved intelligence gathering, political manipulation, and the pursuit of ideological dominance. The geopolitical significance of the Nazi campaign against Freemasonry became particularly evident as the war drew to a close. Both the Allies and the Soviets recognized the potential value of the looted Masonic archives and scrambled to obtain these materials for their own purposes. In the final months of the war, as Allied forces advanced into German-occupied territories, they discovered vast quantities of looted cultural property, including Masonic archives. The Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program, known as the Monuments Men, played a crucial role in identifying and safeguarding these materials. One of the most significant discoveries was made in the salt mines of Altaussee, Austria, where the Nazis had hidden a vast cache of looted art and cultural artifacts. Among the treasures found in the mines were numerous Masonic documents and artifacts, carefully packed and stored by the Nazis. The Allies recognized the importance of these materials not only for their cultural and historical value, but also for their potential intelligence value. The Masonic archives contained detailed records of membership, correspondence, and activities that could provide valuable insights into the networks and connections of individuals across Europe. In addition to the Allies, the Soviet Union was also keenly interested in the looted Masonic archives. As the Red Army advanced into Germany, Soviet forces seized large quantities of Nazi-looted cultural property, including Masonic materials. These documents were transported to Moscow and hidden in secret archives, where they remained inaccessible to Western researchers for decades. The Soviet interest in Masonic archives was driven by both ideological and practical considerations. The Soviets, like the Nazis, viewed Freemasonry with suspicion and saw it as a potential threat to their regime. By seizing and studying Masonic documents, they hoped to uncover information about Masonic networks and activities that could be used for political and intelligence purposes. Moreover, the Soviets were aware of the potential propaganda value of these materials. By exposing alleged Masonic conspiracies and connections, they could further their own ideological goals and discredit their political enemies. The geopolitical drama surrounding the looted Masonic archives continued in the post-war period. The Allies and the Soviets engaged in a complex and often contentious process of restitution and repatriation of looted cultural property. The fate of the Masonic archives became entangled in broader Cold War politics, with both sides seeking to use these materials to their advantage. While the geopolitical dimensions of the Nazi campaign against Freemasonry were driven by practical and ideological considerations, there was also a deeper, more esoteric aspect to this story. Some of the Nazi leaders, particularly Heinrich Himmler, were fascinated by the occult and believed that the looted Masonic archives contained valuable mystical secrets. Heinrich Himmler, the head of the SS, was known for his interest in esoteric and mystical traditions. He saw the SS not just as a paramilitary organization but as a kind of knightly order dedicated to the pursuit of ancient wisdom and the creation of a new Aryan elite. Himmler's vision for the SS was deeply influenced by his fascination with the occult, and he believed that the looted Masonic archives might hold the key to unlocking hidden knowledge and power. One of the central figures in Himmler's esoteric pursuits was Karl Maria Willigut, an SS officer and self-proclaimed mystic. Willigut, who claimed to possess ancient Germanic knowledge, became one of Himmler's closest advisors on matters of the occult. Under Willigut's guidance, Himmler established a special research group within the SS, known as the Sonderkommando, to study the looted Masonic materials. This group was based at Wielsburg Castle in Westphalia, which Himmler envisioned as a mystical center for the SS. Wielsburg became a repository for many of the looted Masonic documents and artifacts, and it was here that the Sonderkommando conducted its research. The work of the Sonderkommando was shrouded in secrecy, but it is known that they conducted extensive studies of the Masonic materials, seeking to uncover hidden knowledge and esoteric wisdom. They believed that the Masonic archives contained valuable information about ancient rituals, symbols, and traditions that could be used to further the goals of the SS. The Nazi persecution of Freemasons did not occur in isolation. It was part of a broader campaign of repression and extermination that targeted various groups deemed undesirable or threatening to the Nazi vision of a pure Aryan society. To fully understand the impact of the Nazi campaign against Freemasonry, it is essential to place it within the broader context of Nazi persecution. The most infamous and horrific aspect of Nazi persecution was, of course, the Holocaust, the systematic genocide of 6 million Jews. The Nazis' anti-Semitic ideology, rooted in centuries of prejudice and hatred, culminated in the industrial-scale murder of Jewish men, women, and children in concentration camps and extermination camps across Europe. In addition to Jews, the Nazis targeted other groups for persecution and extermination, including Roma and Sinti, Gypsies, disabled individuals, political opponents, Jehovah's Witnesses, homosexuals, and Slavs. Each of these groups faced severe repression, imprisonment, and often death at the hands of the Nazi regime. The end of World War II brought an end to the Nazi regime, but the consequences of its actions continued to reverberate for decades. For Freemasonry, the post-war period was marked by efforts to recover from the devastation, rebuild the organization, and seek justice for the crimes committed against its members. One of the first challenges faced by Freemasons in the post-war period was the restoration of looted archives and property. The process of identifying, cataloging, and repatriating these materials was complex and often contentious, involving multiple governments, institutions, and private collectors. In the immediate aftermath of the war, Allied forces played a crucial role in safeguarding and returning looted cultural property. The Monuments, Fine Arts, and Archives program, known as the Monuments Men, worked tirelessly to locate and protect looted artifacts, including Masonic documents and regalia. The post-war period also saw efforts to rebuild Masonic lodges and re-establish the organization in countries where it had been suppressed. In Germany, Freemasonry faced significant challenges in the immediate aftermath of the war. The organization had been effectively destroyed, its members scattered, and its property confiscated. Despite these challenges, German Freemasons began the arduous task of rebuilding their lodges and re-establishing their presence in society. The process was slow and difficult, hampered by the lingering suspicion and prejudice against Freemasonry that had been fueled by Nazi propaganda. As we reflect on the complex history of the Nazi persecution of Freemasonry, several key lessons emerge. These lessons are not only relevant to understanding the past, but also hold important implications for the present and future. 1. The dangers of ideological extremism and the importance of defending democratic values and human rights. 2. The power of propaganda to shape public opinion and incite violence, underscoring the need for critical thinking and media literacy. 3. The importance of cultural preservation and safeguarding heritage for future generations. 4. The need for reconciliation and healing in the aftermath of historical injustices. 5. The value of historical understanding and gaining insights into the forces that shape our world. The story of the Nazi persecution of Freemasonry is a powerful example of the impact of ideological extremism, the resilience of the human spirit, and the enduring relevance of the values that Freemasonry represents. In the face of ongoing challenges and threats to human rights and democratic values, the lessons of this history remain as relevant as ever.